friends ever since.
Despite lusting after pretty much every one of the many unique pedals that Chase Bliss have come out with over the past few years, surprisingly enough, I have never actually physically played with one before. However, that all changed recently when, after about 11 or so months of internal back and forth, I decided to finally purchase Lossy, a pedal that came out, I think, in November of 2023. Chase Bliss kindly gave me a wee bit of a discount, with the understanding that I would probably be doing some sort of video at some point, so here we are. Lossy is an effects pedal that ostensibly looks to capture and recreate a particular type of audio degradation, or at least the memory of that kind of degradation. Specifically, the low quality, heavily compressed audio that many people associate with the early 2000s. So think crappy MP3s ripped from Napster, shared between school friends at lunchtime via, a single set of plasticky earbuds that you bought for 99 pence at the Moore store. Now, I have to say that I'm not especially big on this kind of Gen Z driven Y2K fetishism. To be completely honest, speaking as somebody who grew up in that particular time frame, having that particular type of experience where it was impossible to find good quality versions of the songs that you liked, and you had to spend hours and hours downloading a single track on a 28K modem, only for it to get to 99% and fail, I don't really have any specific desire to go back, or necessarily even to recreate that. However, I do understand something of the fuzzy nostalgic feelings. It could well be something of this, a Mandela effect situation where we en masse are falsely attributing a specific type of sound with a specific era, but there are definitely settings in this pedal that conjure up visions for me of particular, perhaps liminal spaces. Scenes from indie films of yesteryear, for example, where blank-faced teenagers spend all day in empty shopping malls and dead-end towns, where unidentifiable music, I guess I should say, plays through distant tinny speakers and reverberates around the shiny floors and whitewashed walls as they contemplate their pointless existence. The kind of thing that you would find in a Douglas Copeland novel or something like that, maybe. As you can probably gather, despite apparently not being big on Y2K nostalgia, it seems that I was actually rather taken by the idea, and so I decided that I should probably get one of these and see what it was all about for myself. The pedal is based on, but apparently not complete verbatim clone, of a plugin from Goodhertz with the same name. In their initial post about the concept from 2015, Goodhertz specifically talk about how the pedal goes beyond any of the compression algorithms that originally existed at the time, and which they ultimately sought to emulate. Effectively, they are providing a hyper-realization of the specific digital effect that they were after, which I think is a good way to understand or describe what's going on. The Lossy plugin has a lot of the controls and is capable of making a lot of the kind of headline sounds that you might expect or desire from such a thing, and the presets that come with it have quite a distinct character. If you want to explore this world, the plugin is about $79 and there's also a 30-day free trial available as well. I tried out the plugin in a few tracks before I bought the pedal and I did like it, but I am very much a hardware type of guy in case you hadn't noticed, so was ultimately drawn to the pedal, and whilst it is obviously significantly more expensive, I don't regret that purchase at all. The nature of the way that I interact with the pedal, including the extra features that are in there, seem to end up leading me actually to quite different sounds as well than the plugin does. You get a 50% discount code for the plugin in the box with the pedal, so if you want to buy the pedal and also use the plugin, then that's a nice wee incentive to do so. In terms of the boring but functional stuff, the Lossy pedal supports both mono and stereo input and output through a single 1/4 inch jack connection, though you obviously need to use the appropriate TRS or TS cables here and configure the pedal accordingly for it to work as expected. Power is supplied via a standard 9V DC input with no internal battery option that I'm aware of. You know, save the planet, etc. You can control the various parameters of the pedal with 2 additional 1/4 inch jack connections which support MIDI, CV and expression input. The MIDI implementation chart in particular is actually pretty extensive, including the recall of different patches via control change messages. And this opens up quite a lot of possibilities for syncing and sequencing the effects on here. The only downside from my perspective is that it has the MIDI connection on 1/4 inch jack, which means that connecting it up to a standard synthesizer or sequencer is a wee bit more complicated and probably something that most folks won't have encountered frequently. This is something that I personally still have to dive into a bit more. If you don't want to use MIDI, then you can store and recall 2 presets on the pedal itself, using the left and right positions of the switch in the centre. Like many other Chase Bliss pedals, there are a selection of dip switches on the top, which let you configure things in various ways. For example, setting the stereo spread or the latching behaviour of the foot switches and all sorts of other fun stuff. When it comes to functionality, there are a number of different elements that make up the sonic palette of this pedal, and the controls are fairly involved. So if you want detailed information on all of these and how they work, Chase Bliss have got an excellent video manual that you should watch. However, for a brief kind of high-level overview of the key parts, firstly, we have got a band pass filter with controls over the width of the band and the filter cutoff. There is also a dedicated switch to control how steep the filter slope is. In other words, at least from what I understand with my limited knowledge and understanding, how aggressive and or resonant the filtering is. You can also invert the filter to make it band reject using one of the dip switches on the rear. In addition to this, we also have a built-in reverb, which, as you might imagine, is unashamedly and unrealistically digital in nature, in the sense that it isn't pretending to be a particular room that you would find anywhere, the kind of reverb that would probably drive Steve Albini up the wall. You can choose whether to apply the reverb before or after the other effects, using the pre/post dip switch on the rear, and this opens up some cool possibilities, as you will know if you've ever experimented with signal flow fuckery. Which I don't know why I called it that. That's why nobody trusts me to make videos. Loss is one of the magical sections, or at least the more distinct sections to be found on this particular pedal. Here we have 2 knobs and 2 switches which provide different kinds of degradation. The packets switch introduces gaps or dropouts to the audio, kind of like what it might sound like if you're playing music on your phone whilst connected to a Bluetooth speaker and you get a bit too far away, like you go to the kitchen at a party to get something to drink and everyone's shouting, come back, you've got the fucking phone. You know what I'm talking about. This has got a few different possible settings as well, including one which kind of smears over the gaps to make them less abrupt. The other switch controls the loss mode and is selectable between standard, inverse or jitter. Standard is based on low quality MP3 style compression, throwing away bits of audio information effectively, whereas inverse plays only the bits of audio that would be thrown away in standard mode. On the other hand, jitter introduces more unpredictable, glitchy digital irregularities. Finally, there is a freeze mode on here with its own dedicated foot switch to engage or disengage the effect. When the associated LED is green, that's what I would consider or describe as a more standard freeze, where the sound that is currently being played is held indefinitely. However, there is also what Chase Bliss called the slushy mode, where the sound isn't frozen solid, but rather shifts and updates itself according to the rate set by the speed knob. One thing that is probably important to know, because it took me a few minutes to figure out, is that you can access a lot of secondary functions or controls which are marked in white under each knob by holding both the left and right switches down simultaneously whilst making an adjustment. There is also a global knob which acts as a kind of mix control, though in practice it also seems to increase the intensity of the effects, so it's not just a standard blend. On top of all of this, there's also a built-in noise gate, a limiter, and a whole bunch of other functions. Notably, something which is common, I think, to a lot of other Chase Bliss pedals is the ability to modulate certain parameters using a selection of the dip switches on the rear to effectively engage or trigger either an envelope on startup or a kind of bouncing LFO, which adds just this extra layer of interest in there. Because of the way the controls work, with most of the knobs controlling two functions and the ability to store presets, it can be quite difficult to keep track or understand what value each parameter has at any one time. And this could be a bit of a pain, especially if you're somebody that likes to dial things in precisely. However, it does mean that you really have to use your ears and find sounds that you like, as opposed to getting caught up in the specifics, which actually suits me quite nicely. You can also always reset the so-called hidden options by flipping the preset toggle to the left and back 3 times, and that'll get you to where you were started from. When playing with this pedal, every so often I will just come across the sound that suddenly takes me to a fuzzy kind of half-remembered memory, such as back when phone systems were first being digitised and you would sometimes suddenly get this completely garbled signal as the line went haywire. And those kinds of serendipitous discoveries are pretty cool. I can see how they could be used to great effect. However, I've also found that some of my favourite sounds from Lossy aren't really directly connected to any kind of nostalgia whatsoever. Perhaps surprisingly, I've been especially taken by the slushy mode, as it builds up these kind of shifting textures behind the more glitchy elements of the main signal. In some ways, this portion reminds me quite a lot of the microcosm from hologram electronics, though it feels much more controllable and far less prone to just, creating massive, samey kind of walls of ambience. It is still fairly early days for me yet with Lossy, but I genuinely really like it. I was kind of concerned that it was just going to be a bit of a gimmick, something that I wouldn't really be able to make much use of in practice. However, the results that I've been getting thus far anyway are actually very musical, and I've really enjoyed experimenting with it. In many ways, it has kind of inspired me to write and create tracks which otherwise probably never would have. And I guess that's ultimately the whole fucking point of why I get these things, so I consider that a success. All of this has naturally led me to reconsider getting some of the other Chase Bliss pedals that I was trying to avoid purchasing, so I guess we'll see how many of them I end up with now. The worst thing, I guess, would be if Chase Bliss suddenly decide after I've bought these that they're going to bring out a range of Eurorack modules, because as excellent as that would be, it would also definitely bankrupt me. For now, thank you for joining me in this nostalgic trip down memory lane or something. I don't know. Fuck it. Thanks for watching.